Dear listeners, thank you for your incredible support in helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. We're now aiming for 2,000, so please support us by subscribing and helping us reach this milestone. Now let's start the story. I'll never forget that night. While getting extra chairs from the garage for my wife's family dinner, I overheard her brother say, "I still can't believe you married this loser. Dad's right. You need to divorce him before you have kids and get stuck forever." Victoria's response hit like a sledgehammer. Already working on it. My lawyer says we can take half his business, too. I walked back into the house, smiling like nothing was wrong, hosting dinner with perfect composure. 3 days later, my phone was flooded with frantic messages from her. Looking back, I'd sensed something was off with Victoria. She was sneaky with her phone, switching tabs when I walked by, taking calls in another room. After 7 years together, you notice those things. I'm Jonathan, 34. I built my construction business from scratch, just me and a beat-up truck back then. Now, I've got 5 crews running projects across the county. It's not a fortune, but it's a solid life. And apparently, it's valuable enough for her to try and rip away. Victoria, 32, is my wife of 7 years. I supported her through law school, paid her tuition, rent, everything while I was building my business. She comes from an upper-middle-class family that never really approved of the blue-collar guy their daughter brought home. Her dad, Ethan, is some kind of financial advisor. Her mom, Pamela, is in real estate, and her brother, Theodore, thinks his business degree makes him God's gift to capitalism. Here's the thing: I always knew they thought she could do better. The snide comments about my little business or asking when I'd go back to school never stopped. But Victoria always defended me. Or so I thought. Last Saturday was the annual spring dinner at our place, a tradition Victoria insisted on to show off our home to her family. I spent the morning prepping the yard, pressure washing the deck, and helping with the cooking. Everything had to be perfect for her family. I'd been up since 6, getting the smoker ready for the brisket I'd been dry aging all week. Victoria was more tense than usual, snapping at me over small things, but I chalked it up to the usual family dinner stress. Everyone arrived around for her parents, her brother Theodore and his wife, and her younger sister Marigold, who's still in grad school. Victoria's mom immediately started critiquing the living room furniture arrangement, while her dad asked pointed questions about how business was going, with that tone suggesting he was waiting for me to admit failure. By 6, we were ready to eat. I'd set the dining table with our good plates, the ones we got as wedding gifts and barely use. But I realized we needed 2 more chairs from the garage. As I headed out through the side door, I heard voices around the corner of the house. Theodore and Victoria were standing by the azaleas, sharing a cigarette, which was odd, considering she supposedly quit 3 years ago. I was about to call out when I heard my name. I froze. Theodore was saying how he still couldn't believe she married me, insisting their dad was right that she needed to divorce me before having kids and getting stuck forever. What Victoria said next hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. She was already working on it, and her lawyer said they could take half my business, too. I stood there, completely numb, as they laughed about how I had no idea what was coming. They kept talking, mentioning someone named Damien being a much better fit for her, and how she'd wasted her best years with me while I was playing construction. Have you ever had a moment where your entire reality just shifts? 7 years of marriage, the countless nights I stayed up helping her study for exams, the vacations we skipped so she could afford law textbooks, the extra jobs I took to cover her student loans, everything suddenly looked different under the harsh light of what I'd just heard. But I didn't yell, didn't confront them. Something inside me went ice cold. I quietly backed away, grabbed 2 folding chairs from the garage, took 3 deep breaths, and plastered on the fakest smile of my life. Walking back inside, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked perfectly normal. Inside, nuclear wasteland. The rest of that dinner was surreal. I poured wine, carved the brisket, laughed at her dad's terrible jokes, and watched my wife, this stranger across the table, act like everything was normal. I studied her face, trying to find the woman I married. Had she always looked at me with that barely concealed contempt, or was I only seeing it now? When her mom complimented the food and asked for my secret recipe, I nearly lost it. 7 years of family dinners, and only now she decides I might have something worth knowing. I explained the dry aging process with mechanical precision while my brain screamed. At one point, her sister Marigold gave me this strange look, like she was trying to figure something out. She's always been the only decent one in that family. I wonder if she knew. After dessert, Theodore raised a toast to family and future changes, looking directly at Victoria with this smug little smirk. I clinked glasses and drank, thinking about how satisfying it would be to shatter that crystal stem across his face. When they finally left around 11, Victoria started cleaning up, humming to herself. Humming, like she hadn't just demolished our entire life. I told her I'd finished the dishes and that she should get some rest. She kissed my cheek and told me I was such a good husband. The audacity nearly made me sick. After she went to bed, I checked her laptop. It was password protected new for her, but I knew she used the same pattern for most accounts. Third try I was in. The emails to her lawyer started 3 months ago. The plan was to file after securing a partnership at her firm, using my income to bolster her status, then divorcing me once she locked it in. There were spreadsheets detailing my business assets, our accounts, even a timeline for the divorce. And there it was, a transfer record showing she'd been moving small amounts to a separate account for months, just under the amounts that would trigger notifications. Smart lawyer. Smart. I checked our joint savings, $20,000 missing. The money I'd been putting aside for the business expansion, our future. Then I found the text with someone saved as D. Apparently, Damien wasn't just a better fit. He was already test driving my replacement. The messages went back 6 months. 6 months. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. On Monday, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years and met with a divorce attorney while Victoria was at the office. His name was Mike, someone a buddy had recommended. I told him everything, showed him the screenshots I'd taken. Mike laid it out straight. In our state, she could potentially claim half the business's value since it had grown substantially during our marriage, even though she'd never lifted a finger to help build it. Even though I built it from nothing while supporting her through school. When he told me the potential settlement amount, I almost blacked out. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for, cut in half and handed to the woman who was planning to blindside me. I remember asking Mike, "So what? I just bend over and take it?" He started talking about amicable settlements and minimizing damages, but I was already gone, mentally checked out. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. That night, Victoria asked if I was feeling better. She brought home soup, acted concerned. I played along, said I was just tired, probably coming down with something. She suggested I see a doctor. The performance was Oscar-worthy. I nodded, thanked her for caring, told her I loved her. She said it back, without hesitation, 3 meaningless words falling from her lips while she planned my financial execution. I watched her scroll through Instagram as we sat on the couch, stopping to like a photo of us from last Christmas that her sister had posted. The caption read, #couplegoals. I nearly laughed out loud. It was like living with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Every movement, every word, felt calculated. Had she always been this person? Had I been blind for 7 years, or had she changed? Does it even matter? Here's the thing, I've never considered myself a vindictive man. When contractors try to screw me over, I usually just cut ties and move on. When clients don't pay on time, I work with them. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was my life. As I lay awake that second night, watching her sleep peacefully beside me, probably dreaming about spending my money with Damien, something hardened inside me. A clarity I'd never felt before. Victoria and her family always underestimated me. They saw the calloused hands, the lack of a degree, and assumed I was simple. They never understood that building something from nothing requires intelligence, strategy, patience. I started making phone calls the next morning. First to my bank, then to my business partner, then to a few key clients. By noon, I had a plan forming. By dinner, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Victoria wants war? Fine. But she's bringing a butter knife to a chainsaw fight. This isn't about money anymore. It's about showing her and her entire family exactly who they decided to mess with. The loser they looked down on for 7 years is about to give them a masterclass in consequences. So here I am, 3 days after that dinner, finalizing my blueprint for demolition. And just like any good construction project, you need to lay the groundwork before you build. Tomorrow, everything changes. Victoria thinks she's got it all figured out, but she has no idea what's coming. Neither does her family or Damien, whoever the hell he is. I supported her dreams for 7 years. Now, I get to watch hers crumble in real time. I'm still angry, still moving forward, just more strategically now. Here's the thing. When you build something with your hands, you learn that rushing only creates problems you'll have to fix later. Revenge works the same way. It needs a proper foundation. The morning after Victoria left for work, like it was any other normal day, she kissed me goodbye, reminded me to call the plumber about the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, and asked if I could pick up her dry cleaning. The absolute normality of it was surreal, like watching someone sleepwalk through a minefield they planted themselves. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. First order of business, securing my actual business. I called my accountant for an emergency meeting at the coffee shop down the street from my office. No way was I doing this over the phone or at my workplace where employees might overhear. Here's the thing. When you're building a business while supporting someone through school, you make compromises. Sometimes you don't document everything perfectly. Sometimes you cut corners on paperwork because you're exhausted from working 14-hour days. Victoria knew this. She'd even helped with some of our early tax filings when we couldn't afford a proper accountant. The coffee shop meeting was eye-opening. My accountant, let's call him Frank, looked like he hadn't slept in days. Turns out, Victoria had already contacted him, asking innocent-sounding questions about business valuation methods and ownership documentation. She claimed she was helping me prepare for a potential investor meeting. Frank, not knowing what was really happening, had given her some surface-level information but felt uneasy enough to flag it. When I told him the truth, the color drained from his face. "Jonathan, I need to show you something," he said, pulling out his tablet. He opened a series of documents showing my business transactions from the past 3 years. These highlighted ones, they don't quite add up. It turns out Victoria had been doing more than just planning a divorce. She'd been creating a paper trail designed to make it look like I was mishandling business funds. Small discrepancies in dates, amounts moved between accounts at odd times, invoices with inconsistent numbering. Nothing illegal, she was too smart for that, but enough to make things look messy in divorce court. Enough to justify bringing in a forensic accountant who would cost me thousands and find absolutely nothing wrong, but would drag out proceedings for months. Frank and I spent 3 hours documenting everything properly. We created clear trails showing all transactions were legitimate, accelerated payments to suppliers, paid off equipment loans early, and documented Victoria's complete non-involvement in the business operation. While we worked, I got a text from Marigold, Victoria's sister. This was unusual. We've always been friendly, but rarely text directly. She asked if we could meet for coffee sometime soon, said she needed to talk about something important. I agreed to Saturday morning, wondering what that was about. Next stop, the bank. I'd been stewing on something Victoria's brother had said at that dinner, a comment about their parents helping her when the time comes. I had a hunch. And in construction, hunches often save your ass. At the bank, I spoke with our financial advisor and confirmed what I suspected. Victoria had applied for a home equity line of credit against our house 2 weeks ago. The house that's primarily in my name because I made the down payment with pre-marriage savings. The house I renovated myself, adding nearly $100,000 in value. I was still listed as a required signatory, but the paperwork was moving through the system. One more week, and she would have had access to about $200,000 in cash money I'd be partially responsible for repaying. The advisor looked uncomfortable when I explained I hadn't authorized this. After showing my ID and marriage certificate, I was able to cancel the application. Then, I moved half of our joint savings into my personal account, exactly the amount I had contributed. Is that petty? Maybe, but it's a hell of a lot less than she was planning to take. When I got home, I did something I'm not exactly proud of, but desperate times and all that. I installed tiny recording devices in our living room and bedroom. Completely legal in our state since it's my house too, but it definitely crosses an ethical line. I also set up a camera in our home office, angled toward her desk. Then I took the dog for a walk around the neighborhood like nothing was wrong. Waved to the neighbors, tossed a ball for the Jenkins kid, picked up some dog shit with a little plastic bag, all while casually planning the complete dismantling of my marriage. Normal Tuesday stuff. That night over dinner, Victoria seemed distracted, checking her phone constantly. When I asked about her day, she gave vague answers. Then her phone buzzed again, and I caught a glimpse of the name. Damien. Who's Damien? I asked, keeping my voice casual while reaching for more pasta. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth, just for a second. Oh, new client at the firm. Time-sensitive case. Then she put her phone face down on the table. That slight hesitation told me everything. Must be important if he's texting you during dinner, I said, still playing the relaxed husband. She gave me this tight smile. You know how it is. Some people don't respect boundaries. The irony almost made me choke on my garlic bread. After dinner, she said she needed to finish some work and disappeared into the home office. I cleaned the kitchen, making enough noise so she'd think I was busy, then silently moved to the hallway near the office door, which she'd left slightly ajar. I could hear her voice, low and intimate. Not her client voice. Not her talking to family voice. Her bedroom voice. You can't just call whenever you want. No, he doesn't suspect anything. Just be patient. Yes, I miss you too. Each word was another nail in the coffin of whatever feelings I still had for her. The rage I'd been holding back threatened to boil over. I wanted to burst through that door, confront her, in this charade right then and there. But that would have ruined everything. So I walked away, back to the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and pretended to wash more dishes while planning my next moves. Here's the thing about building, timing matters. Pour concrete too soon after rain, and it won't set right. Rush the framing, and the entire structure is compromised. This revenge needed time to cure properly. Wednesday morning, I accidentally left divorce papers I'd printed from the county website visible on my nightstand. Just standard forms, not filled out. When I came back from my shower, they'd been slightly moved. She'd looked at them, but she said nothing, and neither did I. At work, I started laying the groundwork. Called in favors from clients who owed me not for money, but for information. That's when I found out Damien wasn't just some random guy. He was a close friend of Theodore, Victoria's brother. They'd gone to college together. Came from the same kind of money her family did. The kind of guy her parents always wanted for her. And here's where it gets interesting. Damien had been at several family events I'd skipped over the years because I was working. Birthday parties, a ski trip, even a cruise I couldn't go on because I was finishing the project that actually established my business. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned Damien and Victoria had briefly dated in college, before she and I ever met. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just an affair, it was a long game. While digging into all of this, I also created a detailed spreadsheet documenting every penny I'd spent supporting Victoria through school. Tuition, books, rent, the laptop I bought her for graduation, the bar exam prep course, the interview suits, the countless Ubers home from late-night study sessions because I didn't want her taking public transit after dark. Grand total, $43,600. And that's not even counting the interest I could have earned if I'd invested that money into my business instead. That night, Victoria initiated sex for the first time in months. I almost laughed at the timing. Was this part of her plan too? Keep me distracted and satisfied while she arranged my financial execution? I went along with it, performing as expected, feeling nothing but detachment as she play-acted passion. Afterward, while she slept, I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan, counting rotations instead of sheep. One thought kept circling. How long had our marriage been a lie? Was it always transactional for her? Was I just a stepping stone? Thursday morning brought my coffee meet-up with Marigold. I arrived early. Marigold showed up looking nervous. She's always been the odd one in that family, more genuine, less obsessed with appearances. She ordered some complicated coffee drink and picked at a muffin, making small talk until she finally took a deep breath and let it all out. What she told me confirmed everything. She'd known about Victoria and Damien for months. Had caught them together at their parents' lake house during that family weekend I missed because of a water damage emergency at a job site. She confronted Victoria, who swore it was a one-time mistake. But it wasn't. Victoria had drunkenly confided in Marigold after another family dinner I couldn't attend. Told her the whole plan: stay with me until making partner, then upgrade to Damien with half my assets as her golden parachute. Marigold was telling me this because she couldn't stomach it anymore. Said she'd always liked me, thought I was good for her sister, and couldn't understand why her family never gave me a fair chance. I thanked her for her honesty, careful not to reveal that I already knew most of it. Asked her to keep our conversation between us. She agreed, seeming relieved to unburden herself. As she left, she hugged me and whispered that she was sorry. It was the first genuine human connection I'd felt in days. Thursday night, I set the next phase in motion. I created a fake business emergency and called Victoria, saying I needed all hands on deck for a crisis meeting the next night. Told her a major client was threatening to pull out potential financial disaster and I needed her support and her family's advice. She hesitated, said she had plans. I pushed harder, let my voice crack just a bit, told her I was scared of losing everything we'd built. Played on her guilt. She relented, agreeing to host an emergency family dinner Friday night, promising to call her parents and Theodore. Perfect. Friday morning, I put the final touches on my preparations. Set up the dining room with printouts hidden in a folder by my seat. Loaded all the evidence onto a tablet, screenshots, recordings, financial records, everything. Picked up her favorite dessert from that bakery across town she loves so much. At work, I made sure everything was in order. Had a blunt conversation with my business partner, who was understandably shocked but fully supportive. We'd been friends since high school. He knew exactly what Victoria's schooling had cost me in more ways than one. When I got home, Victoria was already there, setting the table with our good plates. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Another family dinner, same stage, but an entirely different play about to unfold. She seemed jittery, checking her phone constantly. When I asked if everyone was confirmed for dinner, she nodded distractedly, saying her parents were bringing wine and Theodore and his wife would be there too. I suggested inviting Marigold as well. Victoria looked surprised but agreed, texting her sister while I watched. The whole gang would be there. Perfect. As I headed upstairs to shower and change, Victoria called after me, asking what the client issue was specifically so she could prepare her thoughts. I told her I'd explained everything during dinner, wanted to go through it just once, with everyone present. Under the shower spray, I rehearsed what I would say, how I would present the evidence, the exact order of revelations for maximum impact. It felt surreal, like preparing for the most high-stakes client presentation of my life. I dressed in the clothes Victoria always said made me look most professional: dark jeans, blue button-down, leather shoes instead of work boots. the costume for my final performance as her dutiful husband. Downstairs, I could hear her on the phone in hushed tones. Thanks to the recorder in the living room, I'd be able to review that conversation later if needed, but I already knew who she was talking to, already knew what she was saying. I let her have this last moment of feeling in control. Let her reassure Damien that everything was going according to plan. Let her believe, for these final hours, that she was the smartest person in the room. The doorbell rang. Victoria jumped, quickly ending her call. Her parents arrived first, her father bringing an expensive bottle of wine as promised. He shook my hand with that same condescending grip, already asking about the business emergency with barely concealed satisfaction in his voice. Theodore and his wife arrived next, followed shortly by Marigold, who couldn't quite meet my eyes. The whole gang was there, all the players in position. As we moved to the dining room, Victoria put her hand on my arm, asking if I was okay. The concern in her voice sounded so genuine that, for a split second, I almost questioned everything. Almost wondered if I'd constructed some elaborate conspiracy theory out of coincidences and misunderstandings. Then her phone buzzed in her pocket. I saw Damien's name flash on the screen before she quickly silenced it, and any last shred of doubt vanished. I took my seat at the head of the table, the folder of evidence resting beside my plate. Victoria sat to my right, her father to my left. The symmetry was perfect, just like that dinner where I first uncovered her betrayal. But now, I was the one with secrets. As Victoria's mother asked about the wine selection, I caught Marigold watching me with a strange expression, part curiosity, part dread. She knew something was coming, just not what. I stood up, wine glass in hand, and everyone fell silent, expecting me to explain the so-called business emergency. I smiled at each of them in turn, saving Victoria for last. Before we get to the reason I called this meeting, I said, raising my glass, I'd like to propose a toast. To family, to loyalty, and to finally seeing things clearly. The confusion on their faces was just the beginning. They had no idea what was coming, and neither did Victoria. I've been staring at my phone for the last hour, watching the message counter climb 447 texts from Victoria in just under 3 days, each one more desperate than the last. I promised to tell you what happened at that dinner, and trust me, it was chaos. I raised my glass and toasted to family, loyalty, and seeing things clearly. The bewilderment on their faces was priceless. Calmly, I sat down and took a sip of Ethan's expensive wine. So, about this business emergency I mentioned, I continued. Victoria squeezed my hand encouragingly, her performance almost admirable for its commitment. Well, I said, pulling out my tablet, I've discovered some serious issues that threaten everything I've built. Problems developing right under my nose. Ethan leaned forward, barely hiding his smugness. Financial issues? Cash flow problems? I've always said your business model seemed precarious. Actually, I said, connecting my tablet to the TV, the problem isn't with my business. It's with my marriage. The room fell silent. Victoria's hand froze on mine. Jonathan, she whispered, her voice tight. What are you doing? Here's the thing, when you're demolishing a structure, you don't start with the roof. You undermine the foundation first. I played the recording of Victoria and Theodore from the previous dinner, their voices filling the room. Theodore telling her she needed to divorce me before having kids and getting stuck forever. Victoria replying that she was already working on it, and her lawyer said they could take half my business, too. I watched their faces. Theodore went pale. Victoria's mother covered her mouth. Ethan's jaw clenched. Marigold closed her eyes like she was watching a car crash she'd known was inevitable. And Victoria just sat there, paralyzed, as her carefully constructed plan crumbled before her eyes. Next, I displayed screenshots of her texts with Damien. Carefully edited, but still damning. 6 months, I said quietly. 6 months you've been seeing him while I've been working 60-hour weeks. I turned to her parents. Did you know she was cheating? Or just that she was planning to divorce me? Ethan tried to cut me off, but I wasn't finished. I swiped to my spreadsheet. Every penny I spent putting Victoria through school. $143,600. That's what I invested in our future while building my business from nothing. I moved to the next screen, displaying documentation of her secret bank account and the canceled home equity application. And this is how she planned to thank me. The silence was absolute. Then 3 things happened almost simultaneously. Ethan stood up, knocking his chair over. This is ridiculous. Victoria, we're leaving. Victoria grabbed my arm. Jonathan, please, I can explain. And Theodore the coward was frantically trying to delete messages under the table. I pointed at him. Those messages you're deleting? I already have them. Every time you helped her plan this. Theodore froze, eyes darting to his wife, who stared at him in horrified realization. Victoria shifted tactics. It wasn't like that, she said, tears welling up. I was confused. Unhappy. We've been growing apart for years. Growing apart? I echoed, my voice low and controlled. While I was paying for your education, while I was building a future for us, I hadn't planned to lose my composure, but something broke. 7 years, I said, voice steady but cold. 7 years I believed in us. And all this time, I was just a stepping stone. Her father cut in. Whatever issues you two have are between you. But if you think you can intimidate my daughter with this ambush, you're mistaken. We have resources you can't imagine. I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Resources? You mean like the $20,000 she stole from our joint account? Or the hellick she tried to take out against my house? Ethan ranted on about everything they'd supposedly done for us. Meanwhile, I noticed Victoria texting under the table, desperation etched into her face. That's when I dropped the final bomb. Did Victoria tell you Damien is married, too? I said casually. The room went still. Even Ethan paused mid-rant. Yeah, I found that out yesterday. His wife's name is Rebecca. She was very understanding when I showed her the texts between her husband and my wife. Victoria's face went white. You what? We had coffee yesterday. Seemed only fair she should know. Ethan's temper finally snapped. He grabbed the edge of my dining table, the one I'd built with my own hands, and flipped it over. Food, wine, plates, everything crashed to the floor. Victoria screamed. Her mother gasped. Theodore stumbled back. I just sat there, unnervingly calm as 7 years of pretense shattered around us. Marigold was the only one who moved to help clean up. Our eyes met through the chaos, and she gave me a small nod, part respect, part sympathy. Ethan pointed at me, finger trembling with rage. You think you've won? You're nothing. You build things with your hands because you weren't smart enough for college. My daughter made a mistake slumming with you, but we'll fix it. I stood up slowly. I may work with my hands, Ethan, but at least I built something real. What have you built? Besides a family of liars? He lunged at me, actually tried to throw a punch. Theodore barely managed to catch him, holding him back while Ethan shouted threats about lawyers. Victoria kept pleading, her voice cracking. Jonathan, please, let's talk privately. This isn't how I wanted. How you wanted to divorce me. Take half of everything I built while being with someone else. I shook my head. There's nothing to talk about. I opened the front door. I think you should all leave now. Theodore dragged his father out, still sputtering with rage. Marigold was the last to leave, pausing at the door. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I always thought you deserved better. Then it was just Victoria and me, standing in the ruins of our dining room. Where are you going to go? She asked, her voice small. I already have a hotel room, I replied. I'll be back for my things tomorrow when you're at work. You planned all this, she whispered. I learned from the best, I said, grabbing my pre-packed overnight bag. As I walked out, she called after me, you'll regret this. My father wasn't bluffing about the lawyers. I didn't respond. Some foundations are too damaged to rebuild. That night at the hotel, I slept better than I had in months. The next day, while Victoria was at work, I returned and packed what mattered: clothes, tools, family photos, my dog's things. I left my key on the counter. I'd already rented a small apartment near my workshop. Not hiding, just making space. I called my employees, explaining I'd be working remotely while dealing with personal matters. For 2 days, I stayed off social media, ignored emails, and focused on setting up my new place. The dog adjusted quickly. Animals always seem to know when something's wrong in a house. On the third morning, I finally turned my phone back on. It immediately exploded with notifications, 47 WhatsApp messages from Victoria, swinging wildly from rage to desperation. The first ones were all caps fury. How dare you embarrass me like that? You've ruined everything. Then they shifted. Jonathan, please call me. We need to talk. I know I made a mistake, but we can work through this. By message 30, she was bargaining. I'll go to therapy. I'll cut off my family. Just please talk to me. Message 45 was simple. I'm sorry. The final 2 came at 3:14 a.m. I told Damien everything. About the money, about the divorce plans. He says we should still be together. And then he just called to break things off. Said he's trying to save his marriage with Rebecca. I have nobody now. I read through them without responding, feeling nothing but tired. Not satisfaction, not vindication. Just emptiness, like finishing a grueling job only for the client to never appreciate the work. As I scrolled, another message popped up. Jonathan, I know you've read these. Please just tell me what you want. Money? The house? I'll sign whatever you want. After everything, she still didn't understand. It was never about money. It was about betrayal. Years wasted. Trust stolen. I finally responded. I've already sent the divorce papers to your office. All I want is for this to be over quickly. Her reply came instantly. Can we meet? Please, just to talk. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Mike, my lawyer. Rebecca, Damien's wife, had reached out to him after I showed her the evidence. She'd done her own digging and discovered Damien had run similar schemes with other women. She wanted to compare notes for our divorce proceedings. As Mike talked, I looked around my bare apartment. A mattress on the floor. Unpacked boxes. The dog watching me with patient eyes. This wasn't how I'd pictured my life at 34, starting over from scratch. But sometimes, you have to tear everything down to fix a compromised foundation. I agreed to meet Rebecca for coffee. Not romantically, just two people finding solidarity in shared betrayal. After hanging up, I sent Victoria one final message. There's nothing to discuss. The marriage is over. Please direct all future communication through our lawyers. Then I blocked her number. That afternoon, I took the dog hiking. My phone buzzed with a text from Marigold. Heard you moved out. Victoria's staying with our parents. Dad's on the warpath, but Mom's finally asking questions about what really happened. I think her perfect daughter facade is cracking. I replied, thanks for letting me know. Hope you're okay through all this. Her response came quickly. I am. Better than okay, actually. Finally told them I'm dropping out of the program. They chose for me to pursue what I actually want. Guess your courage was contagious. As the sun set, I watched my dog roam freely, tail wagging without a care. 7 years gone. Countless hours of work. A future meticulously planned and then destroyed. But also freedom. Truth. A chance to rebuild something real. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca, confirming our coffee meeting, along with a link to a support group for people dealing with divorces involving financial deception. Apparently, it's more common than I'd realized. I pocketed my phone and called the dog. Time to head back, make dinner, maybe unpack. Small steps, one day at a time. Like any good building project, the foundation comes first. And this time, I'm making damn sure it's solid. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.